lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother. It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said. The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse and has since hurt countless others.
For 26 years, 2 pieces of jewelry associated with Princess Diana had all but vanished from sight. There was no clear explanation. No public trace offered a clue as to where they had actually gone. Then one day they suddenly reappeared, but not in the royal archives, not in William's collection. Instead, they appeared in an auction house catalog listed under the name of Laura Lopes, Queen Camilla's daughter. Just 2 photographs shifted the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace: a black diamond pendant, a sapphire bracelet. To the average person, they might have seemed like nothing more than 2 expensive vintage jewelry pieces. But those who saw them at Kensington Palace reportedly recognized something far more unsettling. Both were linked to Princess Diana. And if that provenance was accurate, an almost unavoidable question arose. Why were items associated with Diana surfacing under Camilla's daughter's name after more than 2 decades? The staff member who discovered them didn't simply close the catalog and carry on with their work. The images were quickly escalated to higher-ups. Before long, they were placed before Prince William. William looked at them, and it was his reaction that made the story truly remarkable. He didn't call Camilla. He didn't demand an explanation from Laura Lopes, nor did he attempt to resolve the matter through a private family conversation. William called his legal team. That was the moment a family secret began to morph into a much larger issue. For when William's team began tracing the history of the 2 pieces, what they uncovered reportedly led far beyond Laura. It led back 26 years, back to an explanation William had received when he was just 17, back to a storage facility at Highgrove, and finally a more unsettling question. If these 2 items had been off the books for all those years, were they truly the only things that had gone missing? Before we dive into what William allegedly discovered next, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming chapters of this story. And I'd really love to know, where are you following this story from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Because what happened next didn't begin with a confrontation with Camilla. It began with money. It appears William had begun preparations even before the 2 pieces of jewelry appeared in the catalog. Weeks before the moment that plunged Kensington Palace into silence, a major decision was quietly made at the Duchy of Cornwall. In May, William initiated the liquidation of approximately 20% of the duchy's commercial real estate portfolio, with a total estimated value of around $500 million. On paper, everything looked entirely routine. The language used centered on goals that were hardly controversial: reinvesting in the community, supporting local housing initiatives, and aligning the asset portfolio to serve long-term interests. A casual observer reading the announcement might have dismissed it as a purely financial decision. But behind closed doors, the story revealed a different objective. William reportedly instructed his advisors to scrutinize the financial structures, private funds, and streams of benefit that had surrounded the royal asset system for years. Some of these were suspected of having ties to Camilla's inner circle. Not all of them were illegal. That was precisely what made them difficult to deal with. They existed in gray areas, complex enough to evade the notice of anyone not actively looking for them. And William was looking. His advisors had clearly warned that if he dismantled these structures too abruptly, Clarence House would not view it as a standard financial reorganization. They would interpret it as a message, even as a direct strike. William remained undeterred. He did not publicly criticize anyone. He leveled no accusations. He did not turn the matter into a family feud played out in the media. Instead, William chose a path that was riskier for those dependent on that system. He altered the very structure that sustained it. Around $500 million was shifted. Resources once tied to commercial markets were redirected toward new priorities. Financial channels that had operated quietly for years began to lose their room to maneuver. And most notably, William did not allow a transition period long enough for anyone to easily adapt. At Clarence House, the rapid shift was palpable. Financial advisors began making calls. Legal teams reviewed old agreements. Those accustomed to the behind-the-scenes workings of money and influence began to realize that a familiar power structure was being dismantled. Camilla, as the story goes, was experienced enough to understand that this was no random adjustment. Yet she did not yet know what William was preparing for, and that is precisely what made this move so significant. For the $500 million was not the climax. It was the groundwork. William was ensuring that if a true confrontation arose, he would not enter it fueled merely by a son's resentment. He would enter it with resources, advisors, legal frameworks, and financial power already in place. Then the auction house catalog appeared. 2 pieces of Diana's jewelry, the name Laura Lopes. And in that moment, what had previously looked like a financial restructuring suddenly took on an entirely different meaning. For by the time William saw those 2 photographs, he no longer needed to begin his preparations. He was already prepared. But to understand why the 2 photos in the catalog provoked such a strong reaction from William, the story must go back a long way, to the year 2000. At the time, William was only about 17 years old. Diana had been gone for nearly 3 years, but for a boy who had just lost his mother, 3 years was not long enough for everything to become the past. Some memories do not simply vanish. They lie dormant, waiting for a tiny detail to bring it all flooding back. At some point that year, William happened to see a photograph of Diana. In the photo, she was wearing 2 pieces of jewelry he recognized instantly: a black diamond pendant and a sapphire bracelet. To an outsider, they might have been nothing more than items that once belonged to a famous fashion icon. But to William, they were inextricably linked to his mother, not to a public image, not to a historical figure, but to a mother he had lost. William asked where they were. The answer he received, or so the story goes, sounded entirely reassuring. The items had been moved. They were being preserved. They were kept in a safe place. There was nothing to worry about. The 2 pieces were said to be in storage at Highgrove. And had matters ended there, William might never have given them a second thought in this context. But the problem lay in what did not appear on paper. The 2 pieces of jewelry were not clearly recorded in the official Royal Asset Registry. There was no easily traceable chain of records, no complete catalog identifying their custodian, no tracking mechanism clear enough for anyone to simply open a file and see where they had gone. They existed in a gray area, and that gray area persisted for nearly 26 years. William was just 17 at the time. He had no legal team of his own. He lacked the authority of the Prince of Wales. He was in no position to demand an audit, and more importantly, he was still a teenager learning to cope with a loss that the entire world was watching. So, the question was left hanging, but it didn't truly go away. Then, more than 2 decades later, William saw those very same items again, this time not in a photograph of Diana, but in an auction house catalog, and listed under the name Laura Lopes. That is why the moment was more than just a discovery. It was like an answer arriving 26 years late. An answer that forced William to re-examine everything he had been told as a boy. Back then, he had been assured that the items were safe. Now, however, he was the Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, a husband, a father, and a man with the power to demand a definitive answer. No one could simply tell him that everything was fine and expect the matter to rest there. For if these 2 pieces of jewelry had indeed been kept at Highgrove only to vanish from the records for nearly 26 years before resurfacing under the name of a member of Camilla's family, then the most critical question was no longer where they had gone. It was, who decided they didn't need to be recorded in the first place? William did not call his father. He did not send a message through his private secretaries, nor did he request a meeting via standard palace protocol. Nor did he attempt to turn the matter into a family chat that could be smoothed over with a few words of explanation. William went to Sandringham in person. He carried a leather-bound folder. Inside were no old photographs of Diana, no emotional letters. Instead, there was a legal framework prepared by his team to address the specific issue at hand. That was what made this meeting different. William did not walk into the room as an angry son. He entered as the Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, and as a man who had prepared a plan of action before speaking a word. Facing him was King Charles III. There was no shouting match, no raised voices, no doors slammed in anger. The gravity of the moment lay in the fact that both men understood exactly what the document on the table signified. William laid out 2 paths. The first path was clear-cut. Charles could sign an official document reclassifying Diana's jewelry, returning the items to the category of protected royal assets, and earmarking them for the direct line of succession. This would effectively eliminate any potential claims from Camilla's family. No more gray areas, no more questions regarding personal ownership, no further opportunity for those pieces to exist outside the established system. But should Charles refuse, William had a second path ready. He was prepared to escalate the matter to a higher institutional level involving the Privy Council, arguing that assets pertaining to the crown had not been adequately safeguarded. At this point, the meeting transcended the issue of two pieces of jewelry. For the question was no longer about who held the bracelet or the pendant. The question became who was truly responsible for protecting the institution's assets when the system itself had failed to do so. Charles understood this. He also understood that William had not come merely to test his reaction. Everything had been prearranged. Lawyers were at the ready. Options had been defined. If Charles refused to sign, William had a next move prepared. And it was precisely this that created the heaviest silence of the entire meeting. A father sitting across from his son, a king sitting across from his heir, and between them lay Diana's legacy. Finally, Charles picked up the pen. He signed. With that signature, the two pieces of jewelry were reclassified. They were returned to the category of protected royal assets. Camilla's family was excluded from making any direct claims. On paper, it was merely a decision regarding property. But in terms of power, the implications were far greater. William had just demonstrated that he was no longer the 17-year-old boy who could only accept the explanations of others. He had his own team. He had his own legal tools. He had the capacity to elevate a family matter to an institutional level, and Charles had just acknowledged this with his own signature. Yet this was not the final victory, for that signature did not automatically bring the two pieces of jewelry back. It merely opened the door for William to deploy the full legal machinery he had prepared, and just hours later, that machinery began to move. Charles's signature did not end the battle. It simply gave William the tools to launch its most aggressive phase. And immediately after the signing at Sandringham, William gave the other party no time to adjust. What followed bore no resemblance to a noisy act of retaliation. There were no public statements, no advance warnings, only legal proceedings set rapidly in motion. On May 23rd, William's legal team took the most crucial step. A Marava injunction was filed with the High Court. The aim of the order was to freeze assets linked to Laura Lopes. This meant restricting Laura's ability to move funds, make withdrawals, sell assets, transfer ownership, or alter investment portfolios held in her name. Financial institutions such as Coates and Barclays were named as parties required to comply with the legal directive. And this was what made the situation so serious. William was no longer trying to figure out what Laura intended to do with the two pieces of jewelry. He was ensuring that if the items remained within her control, they could not vanish again. No funds could be transferred. No assets could quietly change hands. No window of opportunity existed for another transfer to take place before the legal system could react. Then at 5:30 a.m. on May 24th, officers arrived at Laura's residence in Wiltshire. The timing was no coincidence. It was the moment chosen to execute the operation before the story could erupt into a media crisis. The search was conducted, and finally the two items surfaced: the black diamond pendant, the sapphire bracelet. After nearly 26 years of being virtually lost from sight, they were recovered through formal legal action. The two items were logged, photographed, and entered into the record, and they were seized. But William wasn't just targeting assets. Alongside the legal campaign, he reportedly cut off one of Camilla's most vital tools of influence: her ability to control the media narrative. No off-the-record briefings. No behind-the-scenes chats with the press. No statements released without oversight. No longer the ability to swiftly shape public opinion before the legal details were clarified. For Camilla, this might have been an even more painful blow than the financial freeze. After all, for years, her power had stemmed from more than just her title. It came from her understanding of the press, her ability to build relationships, and her influence over how a story was told. This time, that door was slammed shut just when she needed it most. Camilla's lawyers reportedly considered invoking sovereign immunity to shield Laura. But the issue was clear-cut. Laura was not being treated as a royal carrying out official duties. She was being treated as a private citizen linked to the disputed assets. That avenue therefore led nowhere. In the end, Laura signed the agreement. She relinquished all claims to the two recovered pieces of jewelry. By then, a matter that had begun with just two catalog photos had completely transformed. It was no longer a question of a bracelet or a pendant. It had become a battle over assets power, the media, and control of Diana's legacy. In less than 2 days, William had turned a catalog photo into a full-scale financial, legal, and media campaign. William did not stop there. For him, recovering the assets addressed only the surface of the issue. What mattered more was ensuring that a similar situation could never happen again. And that is why June 14th marked a new milestone in the story. As the account goes, the High Court audit officially concluded. What began with 2 catalog photos had evolved into a comprehensive record of the provenance, ownership, and long-term management of items associated with Diana. William then issued a brief but unequivocal statement. The core message was, his mother's legacy was not something to be bartered with, nor could its origins be obscured simply because records had been neglected for so long. But William did not stop at a mere statement. He announced a new structure, the Diana Heritage Trust. This move shifted the entire narrative from reactive measures to a long-term defensive strategy. The trust's objective was to gather, safeguard, and manage Diana's jewelry and personal artifacts that could be legally identified and recovered. The most crucial aspect lay in the established line of succession. The first appointee was Catherine, Princess of Wales, and following Catherine, Princess Charlotte. Symbolically, this represented a massive shift. Diana's legacy was no longer confined to a gray area between royal households, private archives, or ambiguous agreements. It was placed on a clear line of succession. Diana, Catherine, Charlotte, a woman who had been the Princess of Wales, the woman currently holding that title, and William's daughter representing the next generation. No more vague approaches. There was no longer any risk of an item vanishing from the records only to resurface years later under a different name. At the very least, that was what William wanted to ensure. By this point, he appeared to have achieved almost all his objectives. 2 pieces of jewelry had been recovered. Laura had signed the agreement. Charles had signed the reclassification document. The sources of influence surrounding Camilla had been significantly weakened. A new trust had been established to safeguard the remaining legacy. And more importantly, William had moved what was once a private family memory into a legal structure that could not easily be altered by a backroom deal. Had the story ended there, it would have been a near-perfect victory. A 26-year-old secret uncovered, assets recovered, ownership clarified, Diana's legacy secured for Catherine and Charlotte. But the audit revealed one final detail, a detail that those in the room, according to the story, could not ignore. For when the old records were fully cross-referenced, the auditors realized that the number of items once associated with the collection was not 2. The actual figure was 14. William had recovered 2. That meant there were still 12 other pieces yet to be found. And from that moment on, the entire sense of victory shifted. Because if 2 items had resurfaced under Laura's name after 26 years, the next question was no longer whether the trust was robust enough. It was, where were the remaining 12? And more importantly, who had put them there? The 2 pieces of jewelry were not the only items that had gone missing. At first glance, one might assume this was merely the result of years of inconsistent record-keeping. Old items might have been moved between warehouses, miscatalogued, or simply lost within a long-standing system. But the audit told a different story. On the contrary, the trail suggested that the remaining 12 artifacts had been moved deliberately. Not just once, not via a straightforward route, but through structures designed to make tracing their origins far more difficult. The assets were severed from their original provenance. Ownership became murky. The final destination was not London Highgrove or any royal archive. It was Delaware, USA. According to records, the 12 artifacts were held within an anonymous private holding structure. And this was where William's team encountered a completely different problem. The legal tools that had worked so swiftly in the UK could not simply be transplanted to the US and applied in the same way. A freezing order had locked down Laura's assets. A search in Wiltshire had recovered 2 items, but Delaware lay beyond the direct reach of those measures. In other words, William had erected a formidable legal wall around the assets still within reach. But those 12 items were on the other side of that wall. Then a detail emerged that made the case even more baffling. A supposedly leaked confidential file mentioned a code name, Montecito Connection. No specific names, no official statement identifying who was behind the movement of the artifacts, no public legal conclusion implicating any specific individual. Just 2 words enough to instantly shift the focus of every question. Montecito Connection. Why did a file concerning Diana's belongings use that phrase? Was it a location, a lead, an intermediary, or simply a code name for a wider network? No one involved in the story offered an official answer. But outside the palace, financial indicators began to draw attention. Outlets like Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal reportedly tracked patterns of asset freezes and unusual fluctuations involving UK-based accounts. They could not publicly reveal the full extent of the royal connection. But the story was significant enough to raise questions that could not easily be silenced. Who moved the 12 artifacts? Why were they sent to Delaware? Who understood the legal system well enough to know that doing so would make recovery more difficult? And most importantly, did the transfer take place before or after William began his investigation? For William, this was the most frustrating paradox. He had won almost every battle in the UK. Charles had signed off. Laura had relinquished her claim. 2 pieces of jewelry had been returned. The Diana Heritage Trust had been established. But when looking at the final tally, that victory instantly shrank. 14 artifacts, 2 recovered, 12 still out of reach. And the most unsettling part wasn't that William hadn't found them yet. It was the evidence suggesting that whoever had moved them knew exactly where to send them to make recovery difficult for William. Someone had stayed one step ahead of William all along. But the story did not end in Delaware. For a few weeks after the audit concluded, William chose a completely different way to send his message. Not through lawyers, not through documents, not through a private confrontation behind palace doors, but through an image. At a previously scheduled royal event, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, appeared together in public. There was no indication that the day's proceedings would be anything out of the ordinary. Guests arrived on time. Photographers took their usual positions. The royals observed protocol as always. But as Catherine entered, one small detail almost immediately drew attention. She was wearing a piece of jewelry that had once belonged to Princess Diana. Not the black diamond pendant that had just been recovered. Not the sapphire bracelet found in Wiltshire. But another piece and item that had never vanished from official records and whose provenance was clearly documented. There was no advance notice, no explanatory speech, not a single line in a press release stating that Catherine was wearing the piece to send a message to anyone. Yet it was that very silence that made the image all the more powerful. For after everything that had just transpired, it was impossible not to see the symbolic significance of that moment. Diana's legacy was visibly present on Catherine, the woman who once held the title of Princess of Wales, the woman who holds it now. And behind Catherine stood Princess Charlotte, positioned next in the line of succession within the structure William had just established. Diana, Catherine, Charlotte, a clear line had been drawn, and at that same event, Queen Camilla was also present. She appeared composed. She observed protocol. She conversed with guests. There was no visible reaction before the cameras. Camilla remained queen. King Charles III remained king. No one lost their title. No one was escorted from the palace in a public spectacle. Yet that very fact reveals the true nature of William's actions. He did not need a loud, triumphant display. The most significant changes took place out of the public eye. Laura Lopes no longer had a claim to the 2 pieces of jewelry. Assets previously within reach were now protected by new legal safeguards. The Diana Heritage Trust remained intact. Catherine became the guardian of the legacy for the current generation. Charlotte was positioned next in line, and the networks that once bolstered Camilla's influence, so the story goes, were dismantled layer by layer. Yet if this was a victory, it remained an incomplete one. For beyond Britain's shores, there remained a figure William could not ignore. 12 artifacts were still believed to be held within a corporate structure in Delaware. 12 pieces of Diana's legacy had yet to return, and the codename Montecito Connection remained in the records unexplained. No one publicly confirmed who held those items. No one explained exactly when they had been moved, and no one knew whether they would remain hidden surface in a private collection or one day reappear in an unexpected place. William had secured what was within his reach. But what happens when assets lie beyond the scope of the very system he had just used to prevail? That is the question that remains. If William had mobilized nearly all the legal power at his disposal, yet recovered only 2 of the 14 artifacts, what would it take to bring the remaining 12 home? And I'd like to know your thoughts. In your opinion, does the real secret behind this story lie with Laura Lopes, Camilla, or the so-called Montecito Connection? Please leave your views in the comments section. And if you want to keep following the next chapters of this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because 2 items have returned, but the remaining 12 might just be the most terrifying part of the story.